The first prototype you see isn't your finished product. And a lot of times people who are going through the process for the first time sort of see a first version of something and freak out if it's not everything they thought they were going to see when it's finished. And so a lot of times it's particularly for new inventors or people who are going through this for the first time, it's seeing, a first prototype or a second prototype and understanding that it's okay that it's not perfect.
We help people with ideas get them to revenue.
Welcome to the Pitch to Product podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Norm.
And on today's episode, we are joined with Kyle from Design to talk about all things prototyping.
You may have a basic understanding as to what prototyping is, but on this episode, we're going to take a deeper dive.
So, Kyle, to kind of start things off, can you tell us exactly what prototyping is?
Yeah, so prototyping at its core is really just another tool in our toolkit. It's kind of one of the things we use to get an idea from someone's head to a finished product. So prototypes can be anything from as simple as just a folded piece of paper trying to figure out how something works to as complicated as machined parts and mechanisms and all sorts of things. So they can take a lot of different forms, but really at the end of the day, they're a tool to allow you to learn something that you need to learn. That could be how a mechanism works. It could be what something looks like, but it's just a way to physically learn something, really.
What would you say the biggest misconception about prototyping is?
I'd say, a lot of times people feel like a prototype has to be really finished looking. It has to be what the final product is going to represent. But really, it all depends on what your goal for that prototype is. You can have prototypes where you're trying to learn something very specific, and it can be, tape and other really rough cobbled together things that don't look like anything, and you can learn from that what you need to learn and be able to move on.
Yeah, that's really, really well said. In the context of when you're starting a new business, kind of talk to us about how important it is to be in that prototyping phase and make sure that your business is, on the right foot on day one.
Yeah, it really depends a ton on exactly what that product or idea is. Prototyping becomes really important in being able to flesh out whether the idea that you think is a great idea, someone else might think is a great idea. So one of the other jobs that a prototype often does is be able to, give a physical representation of your idea to someone. A lot of times it's really hard to sort of describe, all right, here's this idea that I've got, here's how it's going to work or something like that. So if your product idea is something that needs to be able to show like, okay, it does a job or it has a specific function, being able to create that prototype then allows you to be able to show someone else, okay, here's what my idea really is, and be able to get that feedback from that and learn, does someone else see the value in my idea the same way I do?
You can really see how that, works through time and, how we talk to our clients every day and how it really shapes, bringing them through that process. But what does that step-by-step process look like? And when should entrepreneurs be concerned with starting their prototyping in their journey?
I don't think entrepreneurs themselves should be too worried about it. If there's someone that is very hands-on and understands that and can get into prototyping themselves in sort of fleshing out that idea initially, that's great. We have lots of other people who come here and work with us who, that's not what they're into, what they're good at, and it is what we're good at. So we're able to sort of take that over and do a lot of that work for them. But yeah, it really all depends on kind of the comfort level of the person who's doing it. It's definitely not something that, entrepreneurs or inventors should feel like, oh, if I can't make a prototype of my idea, it's not valid or something like that.
Right.
There's a ton of different ways to approach that. So
It's you kind of figure out through your entrepreneurship journey to fire yourself, right, from the jobs that you're not as good at, right?
absolutely.
Yeah, 100%. We always say, in order to get to market, you have to be able to fire yourself from those jobs. And oftentimes, when we're talking to clients, we use the term MVP, so like a minimum viable product, right? And that is kind of the baseline feature that you can still sell in the marketplace. But what would be the difference between the MVP, which is sellable, and a prototype which is not sellable, essentially. What do you think of that from a design perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think the prototype is really, particularly when we get to the point of sort of a finished prototype, or when we're talking about an MVP, you're getting to the point where you're at the point of a pretty finished product. So thinking of a prototype that is in that kind of stage where you're really evaluating what are the finished um, qualities of this product, either how it works or how it looks. Um, that prototype may look and feel like the real thing, but chances are it's not. It's probably going to be 3D printed parts and other materials that might look like the real thing and not be the real thing. So it might be fragile. It's really, a physical representation, so you can again be able to show that idea and the qualities of your product to someone else. Once you get to that MVP, minimum viable product level, you're able to make more than just one of them. Really, that prototype is generally one of something. And once you're getting to that prototype, the production, stage of your MVP, you're really able to then make multiples of the same thing and have them be the same every time you make them.
Yeah, 100%.
And when we see, as we're going through this process with our clients, what would you say the biggest mistakes founders make when they're going through this process? Because again, not everybody has gone through this a million times. A lot of people are going through this the first times. What would you say, the mistakes that you've seen founders make in these initial prototype scenes?
Yeah, a lot of times one of the things that we're having to kind of educate people on a lot as we go through the process is that it is a process. The first prototype you see isn't your finished product. And a lot of times people who are going through the process for the first time sort of see a first version of something and freak out if it's not everything they thought they were going to see when it's finished. And the design process and prototyping are a very iterative process. We need to do something, learn from it, decide what needs to be improved or changed, do it again. And it's sort of a process of iteration and improvement until you get to the product that you're happy with and meets all the required goals. And so a lot of times it's particularly for new inventors or people who are going through this for the first time, it's sort of, excuse me, it's seeing, a first prototype or a second prototype and understanding that it's okay that it's not perfect. And sometimes that also means seeing a prototype that's not intended to be, something you would photograph and put on a website. It's something that's intended to figure out how this button works or something like that. That's all we needed to learn from this, and it did what it needed to do.
Right.
So not getting so caught up in like, well, it's not perfect or it's not, it doesn't look like a finished product that's for sale on Amazon or something yet.
Do you find yourself kind of going back and forth with the client on a regular basis, or did they ever teach you something that you didn't know before?
Definitely. Yeah. All the time. There's tons of times where we, prototype something or sketch something and we're like, oh yeah, this is like doing everything we want it to do. And we show it to the client and they're like, yeah, that's great, but it didn't do this. Or, when you did this, it did something else that and really our clients and inventors are usually the expert in what they're bringing to us.
Very true.
There's most of the time our clients are so varied that we're immersing ourselves in their world, but they're the experts in what they're doing. Usually they've come up with that idea because they're passionate about something and they found a gap in what they had available. So yeah, being able to learn, from the client is huge too.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really well said. And kind of expanding on that, like what the clients, that communication process, right? I mean, how are you guys even deciding, okay, like on, what fixtures either go in the prototype or what fixtures don't go in the prototype? Because like you said, every iteration is you're either adding something, you're taking something away, or maybe a little bit of both, right? In order to get to a version of the MVP, right? So I would love to learn more about like how do you decide? How is that decision making process? Is it capital focused? Is it what the client wants? Or is it like going more towards like we need to make sure this is still designed to manufacture? Like what are the biggest contributors towards a decision like that?
A lot of times it's really a matter of balancing all of those different factors. A lot comes down to sort of what stage in the process you are. as you mentioned, sort of capital and things like that. When we're early in the process, we want to do things, as quickly as we can because we're trying to learn what we need to learn in order to get to the finished product. And generally as cheaply as we can. We don't want to spend, all of our budget on the first prototype and then, be kind of crawling along. So as you get further and further along in the process, you might make decisions where, okay, I'm going to spend some money on, a tool or a more high fidelity prototype or prototype that's uses metal components instead of 3D printed plastics or things like that, which would generally be more expensive. But at that point, it's what's needed to sort of be able to answer whatever question it is you're trying to solve with that prototype. And again, a lot of it comes down to what is the question that I'm trying to answer with this prototype. It could be, how far does the lid of something need to open, which we could do in a very simple and cheap way with a piece of cardboard or something. So if we can do it very quickly and easily with a, very rough prototype, then we'll do that. If we really need something high fidelity in order to learn what we need to learn about it, then we'll do that.
Yeah, excellent. And let's kind of like dig a little bit deeper. Talk about the process of getting to the prototype, right? Because obviously we're before the pre-production sample, we're before, being able to have, what the consumer is going to be having in their hands. So talk to me a little bit about the process of getting to that prototype.
It varies a ton depending on what the product is, really. So there's times where the idea requires prototyping before we even start drawing what it might look like. We need to figure out how something actually works. A lot of times we'll refer to that as a proof of concept, which is another type of prototype, but it's a prototype essentially. But the proof of concept is something that sort of works the way you need it to work to show that, okay, this idea actually does what I think it might do. A lot of times people might have an idea and say, hey, I think it would be great if, X, Y, and Z, but until you come up with something that actually does that, you don't know, does that actually work or does it not work? So, there's sort of proof of concept type prototyping that might happen actually very early in the process before you really even start, designing the product. More commonly, we'll go through our initial process will be drawings and sketches and concepts where we're kind of coming up with a whole bunch of ideas for how to accomplish something, narrowing those ideas down. And once we've gotten to, what we think is going to be the appropriate idea concept for this product, we'll generally move into 3D CAD in the computer. Again, that depends on the type of product. Some products might not need that. But once we've got that CAD model in the computer, we're able to start doing things like 3D printing and, even inside of the computer, move components around and things like that. So more traditional type of what people think of as prototyping, like 3D printing, tends to come kind of middle to 2/3 of the way into the process where you've sort of figured out, okay, here's what we want to do. Here's what it's going to look like, a lot of that kind of stuff. And then you're starting to really be able to 3D print and build, more of what a lot of times people sort of think of as a, prototype. But again, it could be as simple as, a piece of paper that you kind of fold up on day one and say, okay, here's, the way something hinges or the shape that something ought to be. So
Given your background, is it, pretty incredible to see all of these different products and the way that you have to use, the previous experience that you've had to attack each individual product in a different way?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of it does really come down to that experience. With the variety of clients that we have here, it's rare that, something comes across and you see it and you're like, okay, I've seen this 100 times, this specific thing. But in many other projects, you might have seen, a project at the similar point and you've seen, okay, here's where either something got derailed or something that worked or didn't work. There's also a lot of looking at all the things that are in the world that we interact with and everything and really trying to pull, we're looking at some product that we're designing. And when I'm at the grocery store, I see something else and I'm like, oh, a light goes off. And you say, okay, here's an actual solution that might work for something entirely different. So a lot of times it's, pulling from experience, pulling from your daily experience in life. So yeah, it's a matter of recalling a lot of those things that you've gone through before.
Yeah. That's a really good point you bring up because you can just see some things and some things just click. But on the aspect of when you're presenting to the clients, right? Um, how are you? Because it's super easy for a client who does not know, they have the idea, they have the problem, but they do not know the fundamentals of prototyping or design like you do. You've been doing it a long time, so you know it really, really well. What does that communication look like with a client who's like, okay, well, I want this, I want the product to look like this, or I want it to have this functionality, and you immediately you're like, you're gonna go down the wrong foot, or you don't think this is gonna retail well, or it's gonna mess up your margins. Like, how are you preparing the client for those kind of tactical decisions as well as they move closer and closer to eventually hitting market?
Yeah, that's one of the most interesting parts actually about working here is it's very different from a more traditional design consultancy where corporations are hiring you that already have, a line of products and they're asking you to help, make the new version of their product. They're a bunch of professionals in a company who are experienced with their product and have products on the market. Most of our clients are new inventors and this is their first time to this. So there's a big component of not only sort of going through the design process for ourselves, but also educating the client. So as we get to each of the different stages where we're interacting with them, before we even start a presentation, a lot of times it's a matter of saying, okay, this is our first design review together. Here's what we're going to go through today. Here are the goals for today. You're going to see a bunch of drawings. Don't worry about, if there's a specific detail you like from one concept and another concept, we're still at a really early phase and we can, add and remove different things and combine them and, sort of talk them through that. And then again, when we get to a later phase, maybe we're presenting a prototype and sort of making clear to them, okay, this isn't the end version of your product. This is really, what we're trying to learn from this prototype is how big should it be, or what color should it be, or how should it work? So it's a really interesting difference in really working with clients here is putting on that hat of sort of thinking through, okay, I also need to be educating the person that I'm working with on, what it is we're going to do, how we're going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. You're almost like advisor and mentor as well as designer. How many I'm curious, how many on average prototypes does a client go through? And then also like how many design iterations would it take does it take to get to an MVP?
So it varies a ton based on the different type of product that we might have and the difficulty of the solution. Sometimes, the first design idea that we come up with and way that we prototype it, yeah, it worked great. So in that case, we may move right on to the next phase and sort of keep moving right through the process. There's other times where it's like, okay, yeah, we think this is going to work great. We build a prototype and we learn X, Y, and Z about it and have to go back to the drawing board and sort of figure those things out. So it is really an iterative process that could take, one or two tries to sort of get to the solution that's going to work. We could learn several times that what we thought was going to work didn't work and have to try, more times than that. Generally our, earlier design phases, we have a lot of kind of research up front and we'll work with the client after our kickoff to kind of put a document together. We call it a design plan. That sort of is us saying back to the client, here's what we understand you're looking for. Here's how we think we're going to approach that. Is there any misalignment in kind of what you're looking for and what we think you're looking for to make sure that we're kind of going down the right path? From there, we'll typically have a first design review that'll be a whole bunch of different concepts, and we'll go through pluses and minuses of those different concepts and get feedback from the client on, okay, I like this one, but I really like a detail from here. We'll almost always have a second design review from there with refinements and sort of down selecting. So if we started with 5 concepts, the second one we may have 2, and maybe we've refined all the things we talked about in the first design review, and now we're down to sort of 2 options, and the client's going to choose from one of those. So it's pretty typical to go through kind of 2 rounds like that, and then an additional round kind of getting to an approved design. Sometimes the particular project doesn't need that, and we can go straight to, we do that first design review, the client's really clear on what they want, and we can just go right ahead. Sometimes it takes more than that.
So speaking of going back to the drawing board, right? Have you ever pivoted as a result of prototype feedback, or made a major decision as a result of prototype feedback? And just kind of give us, like, what happened in that scenario? What happens in these scenarios if someone sees a prototype and they want to go in a different direction?
Yeah, definitely. It happens for sure. And that's why you want that to happen in the prototyping phase versus when your product's out on the market. So that's where prototypes are really so valuable. One of the things I mentioned when we first started talking about prototypes is really they're a tool, and they're a tool to help you learn something. So when we're completing that prototype and, say it goes to, a bunch of users who are going to test it and try it out, and the feedback comes back, hey, this really didn't work. Yeah, there's lots of times where, okay, we need to be looking at what is it that we can learn from that feedback, what didn't work about it, and how might we be able to make it work. I don't think that there's any case where I would consider anything a failure, particularly when it comes to a prototype. Because again, if your goal for that prototype is to learn something and you learn that it didn't work, you still learn something. So
Right.
it's important to learn that again as early as possible, change direction, and move forward in a different path that it's going to be successful.
It's part of the fun and part of the
Yeah.
mystery of
Part of the process.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
always, that's something we always say over here.
Yeah. I mean, if we knew we could start off on day one and know exactly what we want and be finished on day two, then this would be easy and everybody would be doing it.
We'd have a lot of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
100%.
But it's absolutely a process. And a lot of times, you may sort of go down a path, try to learn something and come back to where you started. And that's okay too. It's really a matter of going through the process to really learn, what is the right solution for the particular problem.
100%. I mean, do you think the biggest lesson you've learned when you're like doing all these prototypes for clients who are starting a business or things that you've done yourself? I mean, it seems like the recurring theme is get married to the process, be okay to fail, get back up. I mean, are those some of the lessons that prototyping has taught you? And if not, are there any others out there that have like really taught you, especially in regards to building a business?
Yeah. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's all a process of learning.
Yeah.
We're iterating, we're trying things, we're finding out whether that thing worked or not. And if it didn't, then it's a matter of pivoting. So I think a lot of it is really about that mindset of learning every day. So whether that's on this project or something I'm doing at home, that I'm working on for myself, really every one of those things you're learning and looking to how can I improve from it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the same. The prototyping is the same kind of lessons in like entrepreneurship as a whole, right? Like, I mean, if you're doing advertising, you gotta launch 10 different campaigns to see what sticks. Just like you gotta have 10 different prototypes to see what the functionality is and how we can actually bring this to market. Um,
Better, 100%. And quite honestly, like, speaking of getting to market, right? Because I know we've talked a lot about the journey as a whole of getting to a functional prototype, but how do you know when a prototype is, market ready? How do you, like, what are the signs of this is ready to be in the consumer's hands?
Yeah, a lot of times it comes back to that MVP idea with the minimum viable product. So when we're starting with an entrepreneur, a lot of times the idea comes in and, there's 10 more things you can always add to it. And because it is an iterative process, you can always keep iterating. So at some point you do have to decide, okay, this is sufficient.
Right.
It's never going to be 100% perfect. There's definitely things you're going to learn even once you manufacture it and get it out in the world, and you're going to, make adjustments and
Customers are your best feedback.
absolutely. Yeah. It's much, stronger learning when you get a product out in the market and you're getting feedback from customers who are really using it.
yeah, 100%. I mean, the iPhones had 17 iterations, and there's probably
Yeah.
20 plus extra things that they could add to the iPhone.
100%.
So it's just one of those processes. But this is a very, very eye-opening conversation for me personally. Kyle, I want to thank you again for hopping on and talk all about prototyping, and I look forward to the next episode.
Thank you.
Excellent. We hope you enjoyed watching this podcast as much as we enjoyed filming it. If you want to learn more about 52 Launch, click these videos here. Don't forget to subscribe to the Pitch to Product podcast. And if you have a product idea,
Head to the show notes, click the link to 52launch.com, and book a free consultation with us.